The sound of boots hitting the floor wrong is something you never forget. It's not a crash, it's not dramatic. It's a soft, hollow thud, the kind of sound that shouldn't exist during a ceremony drill. The kind of sound that makes every instructor within earshot go completely still. That was the sound coming from Hangar Bay 3 at CFB Trenton on a Tuesday morning in late September. Corporal Sean Delacroix had dropped his C7 for the third time in 2 days. Not fumbled. Dropped. Clean release. The rifle hit the gymnasium floor with that same hollow thud, and the 7 other members of the Ceremonial Guard platoon stood at rigid attention, eyes forward, pretending very hard that they had not just heard it. Master Warrant Officer Glenn Thibault did not pretend. He walked across the drill floor at a pace that was not fast and was not slow. It was the pace of a man who has learned that the most terrifying thing you can do in a moment of crisis is refuse to hurry. He stopped 2 feet from Corporal Delacroix and looked at the rifle on the floor. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Delacroix. "Pick it up," he said. Delacroix picked it up. Again, the platoon ran the sequence again, present arms to order arms, the controlled pivot, the extended rifle salute, and at the exact moment of the transition, Delacroix's grip failed. The C7 swung forward. He caught it this time, barely, one hand snatching at the barrel, which was arguably worse. You do not grab a ceremonial rifle by the barrel. You do not improvise. You do not look like you are trying to catch a fish. Thibault closed his eyes for approximately 1 second. The Ceremonial Guard of the Canadian Armed Forces does not have the same public profile as its American counterparts. Most Canadians drive past the gates of CFB Trenton without knowing that inside, a small platoon of soldiers was preparing for something that happens once in a long while. An official state ceremony marking the 50th anniversary of repatriation flights, the solemn missions that brought fallen Canadian soldiers home. The Prime Minister would be there. Veterans' families would be there. Film crews from 3 national broadcasters would be there, and Corporal Sean Delacroix was dropping his rifle. Thibault dismissed the platoon for a 15-minute water break. He stood alone in the drill bay, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the long scuff mark on the floor where the C7 had landed. He had 3 weeks. The park behind the administration building at CFB Trenton is not much to look at. A few picnic tables, a gravel path, some trees the base has been meaning to thin out for years. It borders the fence line of the airfield, and on clear days you can see the Hercules transports lined up on the tarmac like grey whales waiting for deep water. It was out here during the water break that Thibault first saw the old man. He was sitting on the far bench, the one closest to the fence. He had a paper cup of coffee from what looked like a Tim Hortons bag, and he was watching the airfield with the specific, patient attention of someone who has spent a great deal of his life watching airfields. He wore a canvas jacket, faded to a colour that might once have been green, and a pair of work pants that had seen decades of honest use. His hands around the coffee cup were large and roppy, the knuckles swollen in the particular way that comes from either age or weather or both. He looked to be well past 70, maybe past 80, it was difficult to say. Thibault noticed him the way you notice anything that doesn't quite fit. The bench was technically on the administration side of the path, not restricted, but it backed up against the fence of the drill area, and nobody sat there usually. Not because it was forbidden, just because it was far from everything, and there was nothing to see from there except aircraft. Unless you knew what to look for. Thibault went back inside. Delacroix was 23 years old, from Moncton, New Brunswick, and he had wanted to be in the Ceremonial Guard since he was 14, and watched the Remembrance Day service in Ottawa on television. He had worked for it. He had qualified. He was by every technical measure exactly the right soldier for this posting. He just could not hold on to the rifle during the salute sequence. After 2 weeks of drills, Thibault had pulled him aside and asked, quietly and without theatre, what was happening. Delacroix had looked at the floor. "I don't know, sir." "Yes, you do." A long pause. "I keep thinking about what happens if I drop it during the ceremony. And then what happens? And then I drop it." Thibault had nodded slowly. He understood the loop. He had seen it before, though not often, because the men and women who made it to Ceremonial Guard selection were not generally given to this particular variety of failure. It was not a skill problem. It was not a strength problem. It was the problem of a person who had made a mistake once, had thought about it too hard, and had now built an entire architecture of anticipation around the repetition of that mistake. The brain, once it decides something is going to happen, is extraordinarily helpful about making it happen. He had tried corrections. He had tried repetition. He had tried slowing the sequence down to half speed and building back up. He had tried having Delacroix practice with his eyes closed. Nothing was breaking the loop. The old man was on the bench again the next morning. Thibault noticed him through the window of the drill bay. Same jacket, same coffee, same patient attention directed at the airfield. He had been there when the platoon arrived at 0700, and he was still there when Thibault called the first break at 0930. It was unusual enough that Thibault went out to the path. "Morning," he said. The old man looked up. His eyes were a pale grey blue, and they were still very sharp. "Morning. Can I ask what you're doing out here?" "Sitting," the old man said, "drinking coffee." He paused. "Watching. Watching what?" The old man tilted his head slightly toward the fence, toward the drill bay window, and did not say anything. Thibault studied him. "This is a restricted area, sir. The bench isn't." That was technically true. Thibault tried a different approach. "Are you here visiting someone on base?" "No." "Do you have business here?" "No." The old man reached into the Tim Hortons bag and produced a second paper cup. He held it out toward Thibault. "Double-double," he said. "Didn't know what you'd want. It's what I drink." Thibault looked at the coffee cup. He looked at the old man. He took the coffee. "Glenn Thibault," he said. "Ernie McCallum," the old man said. And that was the first time that name appeared in this story, though it would not be the last. They stood there for a moment, Thibault with his coffee, McCallum with his. Both of them looking at the airfield. "Your man is in his head," McCallum said. Thibault went very still. "Pardon?" The young one. Brown hair, left side stance. "He's not dropping it because he can't hold it. He's dropping it because he's waiting to drop it." McCallum took a sip of his coffee. "It's a different problem." Thibault said, carefully, "How long have you been watching?" "Couple of mornings," McCallum said. "And you could see that from here? Through a window?" The old man looked at him. "I've watched a lot of drill," he said simply. Thibault wanted to ask more, but something in the way McCallum said it made him pause. The sentence was not boastful. It was not mysterious. It was the same tone a carpenter might use to say he'd hung a lot of doors, a plain statement of accumulated fact. "The ceremony's in 3 weeks," Thibault said. "I know," said McCallum. "Do you have a suggestion?" The old man was quiet for a moment. "Let me talk to him. The thing you need to understand about Corporal Sean Delacroix is that he was not weak. This matters because the easy interpretation of what was happening to him was that he was cracking under pressure, that the responsibility was too much, that he didn't belong. None of that was true. He had carried more physical weight than a C7 rifle in far less forgiving circumstances. He had qualified on the range, in the field, in conditions that would have broken a lot of people. What was breaking him was something smaller and more precise. A single 3-second window, once per sequence, when the rifle had to leave one hand before the other hand received it. A moment of pure release, pure trust, where you had to let go before you could hold on. And he had let go once when he wasn't supposed to, and now his nervous system remembered. McCallum met him at the bench after morning drill. Thibault had arranged it without explanation, just told Delacroix to take his break outside. Delacroix came out with a water bottle and stopped when he saw the old man. "Sir," he said, looking back toward the building. "Sit down," McCallum said. Delacroix sat. McCallum did not introduce himself. He did not explain why he was there. He just looked at Delacroix for a moment with those pale, sharp eyes, as he said, "What does it feel like?" "The second before." Delacroix blinked. "Sir?" "The second before you drop it. What does it feel like?" Nobody had asked him that. Not Thibault, not the other NCOs, not the base chaplain who had spoken to him once about stress management. They had all asked what he was thinking. Nobody had asked what it felt like. "Like my hand opens," Delacroix said slowly. "It's like something tells it to open." McCallum nodded. "How long have you been trying to keep it closed?" 2 weeks. "That's the problem," McCallum said. "You can't fight it closed. It knows you're fighting. It does the opposite." Delacroix stared at him. "What am I supposed to do instead?" The old man set down his coffee cup. He held out his right hand palm up. Then, very slowly, he closed it into a fist, not tight, just resting, the way a hand closes in sleep. "You give the rifle something to come back to," he said. "Not a grip, a home." Delacroix was quiet. "The fear is telling you to hold on. The fear is lying. You can't hold on during the transfer. That's not how the movement works. You release and you receive. One movement." He paused. "The receiving hand has to be ready before the releasing hand lets go. Not by a second, less than that. But it has to be certain. It has to be a place the rifle is already going. Delacroix turned this over. How do you train that? You don't train your grip, McCallum said. You train your certainty. What happened next is harder to describe because it took place over 10 days and the important moments in it were small. McCallum was on the bench every morning. Thibault had told him the drill schedule in a conversation he would later find difficult to explain to anyone who asked because he was not sure why he had done it. McCallum asked no questions about the ceremony, about the guest list, about the protocol. He asked only about Delacroix, and only in the way a mechanic asks about an engine, specifically, practically, without sentiment. He watched through the window. Some mornings he said nothing. Some mornings he sent a note in with the Tim Hortons bag, a single line written in an old man's careful block printing, addressed to Thibault, which Thibault would read and then walk over and say quietly in Delacroix's ear during a break. The note said things like, "He's rushing the pivot by a quarter beat. Let the sequence find him instead of chasing it. And his left shoulder drops before the transfer. That's the tell. If you can catch the shoulder, you can catch the rifle." And one morning, more simply, he almost had it today. That was on day 8. Thibault had seen it too, the moment for the first time, where the transfer happened and there was no hesitation. Just a clean, fluid passage of the rifle from one position to the next, exactly as it was supposed to look, exactly as the sequence demanded. Delacroix had felt it too. He had come to a stop in the middle of the drill floor, which you do not do, and he had just stood there for a moment with the rifle in both hands and a look on his face that Thibault recognized from a long time ago, from the first time he himself had gotten something right after a long time of getting it wrong. The look of a door opening. On day 10, Thibault came out to the bench during the lunch break. McCallum had his sandwich and his coffee and was reading a newspaper, which was folded in the old-fashioned way, quarters, the way people read newspapers on buses in a different era. "He's going to be fine," Thibault said. McCallum turned a page. "I know. I want to ask you something." The old man folded the newspaper and set it on the bench beside him. He looked up. "Where did you learn to read drill like that?" Thibault said. "Not the mechanics, the psychology, the thing about certainty, about the hand being a home. Where does that come from?" McCallum was quiet for a moment. The wind off the airfield moved through the thinning trees. A Hercules turned on the far tarmac, engines rising. "I was a ceremonial drill instructor," he said finally. "A long time ago. Where?" "Here." He paused. "And other places." Thibault waited. "I was on repatriation flight escort duty," McCallum said. 3 years. Ended in 1994. Thibault did not say anything. He understood what that meant. The repatriation flights, the missions that brought fallen Canadian soldiers home, carried with them the most exacting ceremonial standards in the Canadian Armed Forces. The escort soldiers trained to a level of precision that most regular infantry never encountered. Every movement had to be perfect, not for pride, for the families. "And before that?" Thibault said. McCallum picked up his newspaper. "A lot of before that's," he said, and that was all he said. On the morning of the 12th day, Delacroix arrived at the drill bay carrying something. Thibault noticed it first because Delacroix was never early, and this morning he was early by 20 minutes, and he was not stretching or running through the sequence alone the way some soldiers do. He was standing by the window looking out at the bench. McCallum was not there yet. "You're early," Thibault said. "Yes, sir. Something on your mind?" Delacroix turned from the window. "Do you know who he is, sir? The man on the bench? He told me his name. Do you know anything else?" Thibault considered how to answer this. "Not much," he said. Delacroix was quiet for a moment. "I looked him up," he said. "His name and the repatriation thing you mentioned. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did. I looked it up." He paused. "There's almost nothing. Like there's a record, but it's thin. And then there's just..." He stopped. "There's a commendation. 1993. It's the kind they don't give for drill instruction. The kind they give for other things," he meant. He didn't say it aloud. Thibault looked at the bench. Empty still, the early morning light just starting to clear the tree line. "He hasn't told you anything," Delacroix said. "No, he's not going to, is he?" "Probably not." Delacroix nodded. He was quiet for a long moment, then he said in a different voice, not a soldier's voice, just a young man's voice, "He came here every morning. He sat in the cold and drank bad coffee and watched us through a window. And he never said his name to any of us except you. He never told us what he'd done. He stopped again. He just came to help." Thibault did not say anything because there was nothing that needed to be said. The ceremony took place on the second Friday of October. The morning was overcast, the light flat and grey and even, which is actually ideal for ceremonial drill because it means no harsh shadows, no sun-blind moments during an extended rifle salute. The families of repatriated soldiers were seated in a covered area to the left of the dais. The Prime Minister was on time. The cameras were positioned. The national broadcaster had a correspondent standing by the East Gate who used the phrase solemn occasion twice in her intro and meant it both times. The Ceremonial Guard platoon marched to position in formation. Corporal Sean Delacroix was in the second rank, right side, which meant he was clearly visible on camera. If you were watching the broadcast that night, and a fair number of Canadians were, because the anniversary coverage ran long and the ceremony was in the last segment and people stayed with it, you would have seen the sequence play out: present arms, the extended salute, the controlled pivot, the transfer, clean, fluid, exactly as it was supposed to be. Not good enough to attract attention, which is, in ceremonial drill, the very definition of perfect. Afterwards, the platoon was dismissed. The family section cleared slowly, the way it always does at these things, people not quite ready to leave, not quite ready to let the ritual end. Thibault stood with two of the other officers near the covered dais and accepted handshakes and said the usual things. He looked once toward the public area at the edge of the ceremony ground. He had told McCallum the date. He had told him the time. He had not told him to come because that was not a thing you tell someone like Ernie McCallum. You either tell them the information and let them make the decision, or you don't tell them at all. He saw him at the far edge, near the trees past the last row of public seating, standing canvas jacket. No coffee this time. He was watching the space where the platoon had been, looking at the ground where the formation had stood, at the exact spot where Delacroix had been positioned. He was there for about 3 minutes. Then he turned and walked toward the parking area. Thibault thought about calling out, and then decided not to. It felt wrong to call across that space, in that air on that morning, with the families still moving slowly fine behind. He watched the old man walk until the parking lot trees blocked the sight line. The next morning there was no one on the bench. Thibault had not expected there to be. He went outside during the first break and stood by the bench for a moment. The gravel around it still had the 2 shallow grooves where the legs sat unevenly. McCallum had wedged a folded piece of card under the short leg at some point during the second week, and it was still there, a small square of cardboard holding one corner of the bench level. He left it. 3 months later, Thibault was in Ottawa for a training coordination meeting at NDHQ, and found himself on a Saturday afternoon with nothing scheduled, walking through the National Military Cemetery at Beechwood. He was not looking for anything. He walked the way you walk in such places, slowly reading the names without trying to letting them come to you. He almost missed it. It was a small marker, not elaborate, granite like the others. The name, Ernest James McCallum. The dates put him at 82 years old at the time. Thibault had met him on the bench, which explained some things and didn't explain others. The rank inscribed below the name was not the rank of a drill instructor. It was higher than that. There was a small note tucked under the flowers at the base, the handwritten kind, the kind that gets left at a grave by someone who knows the person was there and knows the person is gone. Thibault did not read it. It was not his to read. He stood there for a while. The October air came through the cemetery in the way it does, clean and clear, and with the smell of the last leaves in it, the smell of things returning to the ground after a good season. He thought about Delacroix, standing in the drill bay with the rifle in both hands, with the look on his face of a door opening. He thought about what it means to teach something without explaining that you know it. To stand at a fence line and watch and wait and drink bad coffee in the cold and never once say, "I have done this, I know what this costs, I know what it is for." To just come and sit and help. There is a particular kind of soldier who never stops serving. Not because they are ordered to, not because they are watching for recognition or waiting for someone to notice, simply because the mission, once understood at that depth, does not have an end date. Ernest James McCallum had understood it at that depth, and on a cold September morning behind an airfield in Trenton, Ontario, drinking Tim Hortons coffee on an uneven bench, he had done what such men always do when they see a young soldier struggling with something they once struggled with themselves. He had come to help. That is what this story is about. Not the ceremony, though the ceremony mattered and it was done with honour. Not the commendation in the records, though that told a story too. Not even the rifle, perfectly transferred, invisible in its perfection to everyone in that field except the one person who needed to get it right. It is about an old man who drove to a military base, alone on a Tuesday morning in September, sat down on a bench by a fence, and watched. It is about what he carried quietly and never put down. If you have known someone like this, a grandparent, a neighbour, a stranger, who showed up at the right moment and asked exactly the right question and never told you their name until you asked. You already know what I'm describing. The best teachers rarely announce themselves. The deepest service rarely makes the news. Remember that. The next time you see an old man sitting quietly somewhere, watching something with those particular sharp eyes, he may have come from somewhere you can't imagine. He may have done something you'll never know about. He may be sitting on an uneven bench in the cold, drinking bad coffee, waiting for the right moment to say the one thing that changes everything. All you have to do is notice.